Way ah hey, way ah hey,
Way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey. Getchi wa bishke makwa, getchi wa bishke makwa, getchi wa bishke makwa. Way ah hey, way ah hey.
way ah hey, way ah hey,
Way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey, way ah hey. Getchi wa bishke makwa, getchi wa bishke makwa, getchi wa bishke makwa. Way ah hey, way ah hey. 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 Getchi wa bishke makwa. Getchi wa bishke makwa. Getchi wa bishke makwa. Way ah hey, way ah hey.
way ah hey, way ah hey,
Way ah hey, way ah hey. 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 Getchi wa bishke makwa. Getchi wa bishke makwa. Getchi wa bishke makwa. Way ah hey, way ah hey.
yeah. All right.
Well, welcome to BIPOC Hour.
Welcome to wow. Ambe again. Welcome, gather in.
Hi, Nina Bunga. I'm just to introduce myself. My name is Nina Sagalowitz. I'm originally from Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. I was born Anne-Marie Thrasher, daughter of Margaret Thrasher and George Vermillion. And I am Inuvialuit and Dene. I am also the lucky mother of 3, blessed grandmother of 1. And I'm really honored to be sitting with you ladies. Yeah, on Kanien'kehá:ka territory. So I'm very honored to be here with you.
Ani, din danger Indigenous cause, Makwa, Dodem, Métis, Soto, Polish, Nda, so-called Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treaty 1 territory, home of the Métis, homeland of the Métis, on Jabba. So, hey guys, Dana Danger. I use they, them pronouns. I originally kind of grew up in so-called Winnipeg, Manitoba, and what brings me out to the Eastern Door in Joni-Jojage, so-called Montreal, was originally colonial school, but you know, it brought me here to all these amazing folks. My mother is Métis Soto, and my father is Polish. And we're more of those, the Métis Scottish type where I'm from. I found out there's a distinction between the Métis French and the Métis Scots. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, Two-Spirit, Indigiqueer, you know, all those things. Hey.
Duck lips.
Tansei.
Nitsigasan Mo Clark, Ekwa Negamo Peseo. Nitotsino Tosquanik, aka Calgary, Treaty 7. Maga Niwigan Jojage, Niaoma Apitawe Gosisan, Otepimseo, Tastawayakinu, French, Norwegian, British. So yeah, I am also Métis family, originally like Treaty 1, so Winnipeg, but grew up in Alberta, grew up in the prairies, And it's been 13 years now that I've been living in Tiohtià:ke in Montreal. And yeah, my father is Métis Cree Norwegian French, and my mother is British and French and probably a few other things. Nice. And yeah, it's really great to be here and to be hanging out.
Right.
With both of you. And I'm kind of like, how to just like be here without thinking that we're being filmed. Because there's like this slight sense of like unease where it's like right before all the cameras started, we were laughing and joking. And so I'm also Two-Spirit. And like for us, we say Tasta Wayakinu, which is actually a term from Marjorie Bocage, who's like an amazing Métis filmmaker, artist, auntie, and she says Tastawayak, which actually means like in between. And then Inu is like person or being. So the in-between beings, which I really like because I think as like a Métis person, we're already kind of like the half-breed, like Apitawe Gosisan, like the, you know, in-between people. So it's like, I'm really in between the in-between. I'm like in the crack, you know? So that's where you'll find me, like making noise. But yeah, Tastawayak Inuak, which I really appreciate, like in-between person. But yeah, Two-Spirit is also how a lot of peeps refer. Yeah.
You mentioned that you were from out west, and I think I forgot to mention how I think I was transported here. I was beamed here. No, I'm just kidding. Through the 60 scoop. The government decided that my mother, as an Eskimo woman, was not enough to raise her kids. So they went and took all her kids. And so I was raised here in Montreal. And it took me a while to figure out where I was from and go home and find my family. But yeah, I was transported here. And it's interesting that we're all from out west and that we're here and we're talking. And I identify as like two-spirited, but I'm also still trying to figure out what that means in terms of, because there's like where it came from and how different people's interpretation. And like before two-spirited, I was like, okay, well, I'm bisexual, but then I'm like, that's very, I don't know, I find like labels are very hard, people's reaction to when I, label myself. So I just kind of, I love who I'm with and I am with who I'm with. And so it's kind of, growing up, it was very, I didn't have, like that conversation was never happening in my home. Yeah. And it was very, like my father's Canadian coming from a Jewish family, and my mother's immigrated from the Philippines, and that was the Catholic side. So sexuality as a topic was never talked about ever. So I never grew up understanding, I didn't have words to like say, explain what I was feeling when I was with a girl or with a boy, or if I had feelings for a girl, if I had feelings for a boy, what that meant. And so I think as I've gotten older, like that term is still kind of like in my brain. So that's,
No, for sure. Because for me, coming from so-called Winnipeg, that's where that word two-spirit came from, was which is interesting enough, because like all those elders who were there at this place where this word came into being, I get to be in community with them, which is really great. And so actually this is interesting, during the Oka crisis in 1990, they had a solidarity peace camp on the Manitoba legislative grounds. And so they had this peace camp, and Myra Lemire was the one who had this dream where this term comes from. And it's not, so it's not like my story necessarily to tell, because she's the one that had the dream. But Myra's really interesting because Myra was also part of the Medeowin Society and is very much in the culture as a Cree Ojibwe person. And I remember hearing that story for the first time, and I was like, oh, like just hearing how that came into being as like, for me, I feel like that word is a placeholder. There's just, because maybe right now, because of colonization and that, we don't have all of the language, we don't have all of our roles, we don't have our responsibilities, because they were literally forced underground, and only those who could practice in the secrecy of places really got access to that. And for those who didn't, were usually assimilated, really didn't have it was more of I feel like it was more of an economical choice than anything else, you know, how to survive that.
And to push down that power too. Because I think there's like, what I'm really seeing right now, which is really cool, is like the resurgence of two-spirit, queer, trans, non-binary, fluid kin, who are super powerful beings and seers. And it's interesting because I feel like labels, it's like, what is a label? What is a label? But labels actually, they can and do have a lot of power.
Yeah.
And I know out west, Joanne and Jerry Saddleback from Saddle Lake, they've been like educating and like bringing in more terms, like, you know, so in Nehiawe, like in Plains Cree, there's like 5 or 6 genders. And it speaks about roles, but it speaks about the fluidity and the flexibility of those roles and the value and the importance of like a much larger circle than just like men over here, women over here, and anyone who doesn't identify like, well, there's just no place for you.
Yeah, you're essentially erased, you know?
Right.
Like you don't exist in that, in this binary system, you just don't exist. So even for me, like I used to identify as bisexual and then I was like, oh, but that's kind of for me, it feels like it's in the binary. Although now I know the people have like gone through and like kind of like added bisexual as one or more or whatever. But for me, it still wasn't enough to express the love that I feel for people, like for their essence, like your genitals and all that. I can figure that out. Because we're gonna talk, we're gonna communicate about that, right? Yeah. So I can figure that out. I want to know what you like, and you probably want to know what I like too. So,
like even in the Inuit community, I find it's really hard because like in the communities up north, there's been so much indoctrination and into the church that just even there's no more shamans. Medicine is just, you know, it's like there's medicine in the sense where like we still have our traditional foods and our flowers and our berries and all those things, but even our sexuality, there's no conversation at all. And it's the younger generation now who are coming out of the communities and coming into urban settings who are just like, you know, they're more accepting and there's less judgment and there's more vocabulary, more words, and but I'm finding that it's a process where even saying that I'm bisexual, even when I was in the community, I had to be very secretive. So even right now I'm saying this and I'm very nervous about it because in the community, even in the gay community, I've had a lot of like backlash from the lesbian community saying that I didn't make a choice yet.
Oh, right.
So even just saying bisexual, it in my body, I feel like I'm in defense mode. So I don't say it. And it's not because I'm not. It's just I don't say it because in the Native community, it's like, well, what does that mean? And then two-spirited, and I don't have the words either. So it's just, I'm still on my personal journey. But all I know is that take away all the labels. And I'm like, no, I love, like you say, like I meet somebody and I'm like, I just love who I love and I'm attracted to who I'm attracted to. And it's not necessarily what's, you know, in your pants that's going to just, you know, determine who I'm going to end up with. So it's kind of, it's unwrapping and unwrapping all the colonization. Colonization.
All the colonization.
The communities and the words that have been lost, you know. So it's
and I think it's interesting because you talk about, you know, like a lot of youth coming out of community in order to find themselves in spaces where there is more acceptance and openness and whatnot. But then like how then to return and what's that shifting and that like kind of returning of like, not just like, oh, well, you're the city folk or like, oh, well, you're no longer, you know, Native or whatever, right? Yeah. But I'm also seeing like a lot of elders who I've worked with who are really open to learning and also open to making mistakes. You know, like, okay, well, we basically had to get back the ceremonies, right? So it's like, you know, ceremonies that had to go underground for like 100 years, whatever. And so it's like just been kind of the return of like, how do we like have resurgence and like feeling safe enough to hold and host these sacred spaces and ceremonies. And now I'm like, oh, there's this beautiful kind of intergenerational, like kind of bridge that's forming where it's like a lot of the youth are kind of the disruptors of those ceremonies to be like, actually, we got to go back even further, further beyond like the church and like the binary and all of those processes. Like, it's not black and white, it's not man and woman, it's all. And so to like actually start to be more fluid in those ceremonies and in those spaces and to make those challenges. And, you know, one of my elders, Joseph, like he's always like, yeah, you know, LGBTQSQRM, you know, like trying to get the whole acronym in there. But it's like, I giggle and I'm also like, it's so sweet because, you know, he's a residential school survivor and he's a pipe carrier and he's somebody who's like really open space for a lot of two-spirit kin as a non-two-spirit person and is open and needs to learn and wants to learn, you know?
Well, that's just it, you know? Like, I think about, historically, you see the movement of Indigenous queer individuals from community coming to the city because, yes, there was all the racism, but like, you could just be, you could find other people, you could like, you know, because there's only so many people you can choose to and who's out and who's open.
Yes.
But there's just bigger conversations going on. You see this like, you know, small town versus big city. That's like the dichotomy that we always like hear about. And for me, it's like really important to honor that yes, they had to flee certain violences because they were misunderstood, because they've been erased. But that journey back is really difficult. I remember when I first started to Sundance, I remember having a really difficult time in the lodge because I had dreams about space for two-spirit people. And I had, I remember feeling very ashamed to not always wear, like I always had to wear my skirt and the arbor. And, you know, for me, I understand the teachings of the skirt, but it's also feels like it's very imposed based on an idea of gender, of an idea of womanhood, which doesn't really fit with me. You know, when I wear my skirt, it's because I want to put it on my body. I want to have bodily sovereignty over what I wear and what I don't wear and how I'm perceived. And that was really difficult because all of a sudden you're the disruptor, and unfortunately you stick out and you get all of that. You get all of that pushback because it seems like you're trying to change the protocols, you're trying to change the system, whereas
instead of returning it back to something that it was prior to all that colonial crap. But that's like the kind of the divide, you know.
Divide,
but I
sure.
appreciate it feels like there's more two-spirit kin who are feeling safer in those environments and in those spaces. And, you know, even prepping for Sundance this year, like I was having talks with some kin, like, can we bring in some ribbon pants?
Yeah.
Can we bring in, you know, like things
ribbon
where
crop tops. Ribbon
crop tops. Well, actually, then there was discussion of ribbon booty shorts.
Yes.
Not sure if Sundance will be ready for booty shorts. Like, I'll still respect the leg covering, you know, but booty shorts, maybe that's for another year.
And I think that, you know, when you talk about, like when you talk about skirts and you talk about, you know, changing and looking into pants, and I think that that's where as artists, we come into that space where we can look at something like a system, you know, like when you're talking about, you know, where, you know, someone is pushing back from like, it feels like there's pushback from the system, but the system are people who are trying to get back their ceremonies, but it's a struggle too, because I think I watch people learning their ceremonies, but within a colonized mind. So they're intaking this information of like ceremony, and it's like, well, okay, well, you have a rattle. Okay, well, you're only, then there's a whole bunch of rules. And you can only hold a rattle when you've learned this many songs. And you can only hold a rattle when you're on your moon time or when you're not on your moon time. And then there's women can't be on the drum, and all these, like in my Dene community, like where I'm from, traditionally women are not allowed to drum.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like, but I've been drumming.
So what does that mean?
And I'm like, does that mean, and I'm thinking, okay, well, where does that come from and who's they? And how long has they, whoever it is, the men, have decided that the women cannot be drumming? And why is it that we're not allowed to drum?
Oh, heck yeah.
And then, so I feel like as I'm drumming, because I feel comfortable drumming, and whether it's because I'm two-spirited, whether it's because I'm just a drummer, whether it's, where do those rules come from? And as traditional as it is, if a person, whether it's male or female, giving me crap from it, you know, but they're in this system where they're like, well, I'm traditional.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my skirt and I smudge every day and
I'm
supposed
sober,
to be drumming.
and I've committed to creator, and that means that I have a direct line of communication, and anything you say or do, I'm going to text message back to him, and he's going to come and get you, like, in it.
But it's so interesting.
Now. Like, I mean, what is it?
But then it's like, why am I being crapped on for doing something that feels really good?
Yeah.
You know, and as artists, I think that is where you're talking about. That's where I'm, you know, you'll find me in the crack, but I think that's where we're making space as artists.
Yeah.
You know? So
and widening those cracks where people have fallen through.
And putting it in a way.
And people who didn't have the empowerment or who didn't have enough aunties or kin to tell them, like, no, you can still carry that medicine, because that drum is medicine.
Yeah.
And that drum is important for healing, and that drum is part of your gift, and we need your gifts, and we need you to be using that drum. I remember when I was out in Dene territory and I got that teaching, and I was like, well, I'm doing a tour with my drum. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so I acknowledged, I said, you know, I'm Métis, I'm from a different territory. This is part of my gift. This is part of my bundle. And I have been taught and I have been told that it's important for me to share my gifts, because if I don't share my gifts, I get sick.
Yep.
Yes.
And I played my drum.
Yes.
And I did it with, like, care and respect. And at the end of that show, this was in Fort Smith, at the end of that show, these little old kukums, these little old ladies came up to me and they're like, thank you so much for playing your drum. We started a drum group a couple weeks ago or whatever. It's Madeline's 80th birthday. We're granddaughters of the moon, you know? And I just said, great. Like, we need, don't matter what age you are, don't matter what gender, whatever, you know, it's like to be able to take that back and to be able to, like, determine how to feel safe in the taking back. Yeah.
And I think also as artists, I think when we are challenging the people that are in systems, I think that we do it in such a way that it's palpable.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easier to do it in a way where because my energy when I sing or when I do things, and I don't necessarily go out there, well, I'm going to change the system, or I'm going to, like, challenge like patriarchy, because that's overwhelming to me. And it's very scary to think, like, so as I'm drumming or as I'm standing on stage or even, like, in private, or it's a way for me to gently push and gently ask people to question, why is this? Why are you so angry at this? Why is this triggering you? Why is this, you know, and especially with, like, a lot of drums and a lot of songs are being used for ceremony right now because of the children, you know, like, and so we're asking people, like, can we not crap on each other while we're trying to heal? And as artists, like, we're singing, you know, we're asked to sing at these events, and it's,
and sing,
whether we're not, we're
and
drumming.
sing.
Like, why are you looking at me? Why are you taking this opportunity to crap on me while I'm using a drum?
Yeah.
This is not what it is. You know, like, as a woman, as someone who carries songs, this is what I've been asked to do. And it's a gentle way, you know. So I guess one of the things is, like, as an artist, like, what is it in that context? Like, what are some of the things that you think, wow, you know, like, I really challenged, or is this what I want to do, or, you know?
Honestly, what you're saying, like, when you were talking, you know, the first thing I thought of was, like, how I very much see Two-Spirit, like, existence as resistance, period. Like, I mean, not to make it, like, all political, but, like, it's kind of hard to when you're, like, you are
political away.
Yeah, but I mean, like, listen, like, here we are, we're existing, and that's exactly, like, we are not supposed to exist. We are supposed to be erased. So the fact that we are even here and the ways that we do it, you know, like, I always think of that term, you get more bees with honey than vinegar, right? And I feel like the artistry, the creativity, that's our honey, you know? Honey.
Well, and I think of water, like, when you talk about that, the kind of and I don't want to use the word peaceful, but that's the first thing that's coming to me. It's like resistance that is like water. Me, gender is like water. We are fluid. We move between those cracks, and if we freeze, we condense and we get big. But when we all come together, it's like, that's the movement. And I feel like, you know, how to shift systems, it's through moving people. And I think that's why being a creator, that's why being an artist, a drum carrier, a drum keeper, you know, that's so important, because it's like, sure, people are going to read the news, they're going to listen to the news, whatever, and it's like talking heads.
Yeah.
But when you got like a singing spirit, and that has like a different way to penetrate and to permeate like the heart, and to actually move with prayer, you know, and whether or not it's like done in a ceremonial way, it's like walking down the street and singing in this space, like who the heck knows what this building first was and what type of colonial setup, you know, we're currently like having this conversation is, but it's like infusing things with that medicine of song. And that's the act of resistance, like 100%. And teaching those songs to your kids, and teaching those songs to your elders, and teaching those songs to that kid that you meet on the street, to the two-spirit kin who like doesn't know if they belong. Because, you know, I think it's like, it's that way of like bringing everybody back into circle, which we really need, and back into language, you know, like you teaching us the white bear, like get your Wabashke Makwa song. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that song.
Oh,
that
for
we
sure.
started with.
Because every song has like, you know, for everybody else to understand, everybody's got their own little copyright in a sense. But for us,
Indian copyright.
Indian copyright, you know, and it's more about like, not like, oh, who's those royalties going to, but it's more about like giving honor to that person for however that dream or that song or however it came to them, you know. And specifically, I love singing that song because it is that song. The White Bear song is specifically for Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirit people because of the levels of gendered violence and you know, sexual violence that we face. And so this one is like to call on that good energy from that white bear, that polar bear that lives in the conditions that most of us would not be able to, you know, and such a, you know, it's a really resilient bear. It's really, and it is, I think that there's something that's really powerful about that medicine and the teachings that come with the bear about courage and bravery and all those things. And
survival.
Survival, you know, and that survival, right? And that, you know, that persistence to not give up no matter, you know.
And also the sacrifice too, like
the
hibernation.
The hibernation, all that, so many teachings within that. And so, you know, that's a song that I really want, that was intended to be shared. So my mother actually, it's so interesting because I think about how, I'm so curious to hear from y'all too about how you came into song or voice or creativity in that kind of musical way. Because for me, it's so interesting. My mom had a dream about a big drum, and I was much younger when this all happened. And so I started playing with her on this big drum with other women. And I didn't even know at the time that that was really taboo. This was like even 10 years ago, a decade ago. It was really taboo. There was only men on drums, right? And so to be part of that and not even know that I'm a part of a resistance, something that's like really pushing up against that, you know? And my mother, for her, song is so like important to who we are. And so she does a lot of different cultural activities. And one of them is she works specifically with folks that are affected by fetal alcohol syndrome. And so that's some big part of the work and gifts that she does. And it was actually one of the participants. She used to do this volunteer drum drop-in for folks, like specifically women that are affected by FAS. And one of them, dreamt about this song. She had a dream about the vocal bowl, the way hey, away, hey. That was her. And so she passed it to my mother, who but she knows from protocol, you got to smoke the pipe and you got to ask, what is this for? And it all kind of clicked, you know, all of those women that were there. I remember her, because I love this way with the technology now with the iPhones, you know, she'll just like, you know, hit record on her phone and send me something and just, you know, sends it through text message. I listen, I send it back. So you got this back and forth going. And this is honestly how I learned a lot of my songs, because by the time that I was ready to really get into it, I was already, you know, left the nest and all those sort of things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But where those songs come from, it's so amazing, those gifts, and like what a gift for that person to give this to us to share with everyone. And especially within MMI, you know, murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirit people, you know, it's really important for us to to have these roles and responsibilities and these songs shared with us so that we know who we are and where we belong, you know?
And I think it's a really safe way to bring people in.
Yeah.
Because it's when you're teaching somebody about a song, you know, like, and I think that's one of the most traditional things, or most, I don't know, it's our way in our community, is when we teach a song, or when we teach beading, or when we teach an art or craft, it's not only about the craft. Because as we're learning, we're talking, you know, like I've been, like when I started because I was part of the 60s group, and at the age of 18 was the first time I met like a Native person at the Native Friendship Center. And I was like so hungry. I call myself SpongeBob, because I was like a sponge. I was just like all dried up. It's just, you know, and I was just so hungry for knowledge. And so I would sit at a table of, you know, with women and men and two-spirited people, and we were just all beading, you know, but it was never just about the beading.
No,
it was like stories from home,
Yeah.
stories about, you know, food. And I grew up in like a Jewish Filipino home, you know, like I went to synagogue and I went to church. I never went goose hunting. I never went moose hunting. I never went deer hunting. I never had beluga whale. I never had, you know, all these. So it was a way for me to gently learn without being judged for not knowing already, you know, because I was learning around longer. So to be part of like the two-spirited community or the LGBT, and to have those songs be taught, I can just imagine just learning and then just being in creating that space. Because, you know, at the beginning of our recording of this taping, we sang that song, and it's almost like it creates that space of safety.
Yep.
You know, and it's just, and then I'm just like, oh, okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm ready.
Yes.
And for someone who is kind of still searching, I can really see that how safe that would feel, you know, to learn those drums.
It's so beautiful, because to me it's like, you know, we talk about like language reclamation and like learning your language, and you know, this is like such a big thing. But I think that like music and song and drum songs and these sounds, they are like languages too, and they're languages that so many different kin from so many different nations know and have heard and have learned and have received. And, you know, you talk about like, safety and how that creates this certain energy and harm reduction through song, through song, like singing, creating, learning. And I still remember at one of the marches and vigils for MMIW2SG, and there was a woman who was very inebriated and homeless Inuk woman, and she was like really kind of hysterical because it's a huge group. And we're in her kind of territory, you know, like we're in an urban space gathering with the big group of people, and that's usually where she kind of hangs out and lives. And I'm up next to get onto that, you know, megaphone that wasn't really working, and I'm like, how am I going to sing loud enough? What am I going to do? And I started to sing the Strong Woman song, and I sang one line, and her voice came from the audience, and she like just right back at me. She had learned that song probably at the Native Women's Shelter, probably through like, you know, a drum group or something. And she started to sing back, and it was like all of a sudden, everything just kind of found its like balance again. And that's when like the hearts of everybody there too, because that's why we carry those drums. That's the heartbeat of Mother Earth. That's the heartbeat of us. That's the heartbeat of creation. And when we sing and play together, our hearts beat as one. So it is it's a force field, you know, it's so powerful. But to think and to know that like we can and we have the right to sing those songs and that it's safe to sing them. And as two-spirit kin that it's okay to sing them. I mean, you talk about the big drum. And I think of the two-spirit, like, Bear Moon, you know, drum and how that came into being. And even just, how's that living for you? And how did that come to life, if you feel comfortable talking about it?
Absolutely. I actually remember the first time I actually ever saw like a big drum with other two-spirit people on it was at the closing of the Truth and Reconciliation inquiry. My mother was support for the survivors, some of the survivors there, when they were giving their testimonies. And I remember being there because a really good friend of mine, Candace, had invited me, and that's where I met Melody McIver and Erica Lee Violet, all these like badass like Indigenous folks. And they were working on the baby vamps room. So there was kind of like walking with our sisters. They had a room specifically just for the baby vamps.
I know that. I know that.
I know that. Love that one.
Yeah,
but this was all the babies. And this is so, I think that's something like, it also reminds me, you know, with what's going on right now, I'm like, we always knew. There was always, we always knew that there was children that never returned. And so that was already there. And then to walk in and see this big drum with a person that had like this, I remember they had like a mullet and like glasses and really feminine face, but then like a shirt tucked in, like looked kind of like an Albertan dad, you know,
Albertan dad. Right. My dad, basically.
Blue jeans tucked in, gold watch. And I was like, I'm confused. Who's on this drum? And then there's somebody else with a skirt. And I was like, wait, what? And this is just happening out in the open? Wow. Like nobody's telling them to like stop?
Yeah.
So when you see that, that's what I mean. Like when you see that existence where the people are just existing. And ever since then I was bit, like I knew it. And I was like, so scared because I was like, oh my goodness, like from what I know, big drums are, you know, the power drums, it's men, it's competition, it's all of that.
And there's so much protocol.
So much protocol.
And do's and don'ts and very rigid.
Very, very rigid. Yeah. And so the thing that was so amazing about that is it was like, oh, there is more than one ways in which this drum can exist. And that's when I like knew right away that I just needed to get my hands on a big drum. And even that process of vetting who you're getting it from, all of that, those steps, you know, like I dropped like my elder's name, Gawanota Sedalia, and like, of course, tribal spirit music. They're so dope. They're so like great. Women on the drums, two spirit people on the drums.
Dog on the drum.
Dog on the drum. Whoever.
Res dog drum group. Up next. The Bowsers,
The Bowsers, you know? And it just came from that. But what was so special about that is like when we woke it up, essentially, which is like what I found you had to do, there was like 8 or 9 other two-spirit people there, and that we came together and made tobacco ties and then put all of our intention for that drum and what it's going to do, you know? So this drum like goes everywhere. It goes wherever I go, and, you know, and maybe that might change in the future because, you know, ownership and knowledge keeping and sharing and things like that is really important to me. And like people need to have access to it. You know, I don't want it to just be locked up in a closet, you know? Like, you know,
it's definitely out of the closet.
It's Oh, watch out. Those dad jokes coming in strong. Those uncles.
Coming in strong over here from the Métis Nation. Mo Clark with the dad joke.
Uncle Mo.
Okay. Out of the closet.
Out of the closet.
Coming out ceremony.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, in the coming in ceremony, like I always think of Alex Wilson and some of their teachings around like the coming in. You know, it's like actually you're not having to leave yourself, you're actually coming deeper into your sense of place and self and community. You know, like I just imagine like if we had walking in ceremonies instead of the walking out ceremonies for two-spirit kin.
Yeah.
You know, like when you're like in that space where you realize that that's your gift, that's your power, like, okay, the community is going to gather around and it's going to honor you for that. Honor you for those gifts, you know?
And I think that that's one of the things too, is that when we're thinking about ceremony and I think that as artists and it's because the way we see the world is so different than linear. And the ideas that we come up with, like even just talking about that, I think those things existed before.
Oh yeah.
You know, because we're remembering. That's how I see it. Like these are ideas, and they were, as much as like ceremonies had to go under, those part of our brains went into hiding because they were, it wasn't safe to talk about it, right? And it's like I find that all these, it's, you know, decolonizing for me in my brain is to come up with these ideas and put these ideas and these images of ceremony into reality without, how do you say, like cutting myself short with shoulds and don'ts and, well, it's not traditional,
right?
You know, and it's not saying like, just because it doesn't exist now doesn't mean that it didn't exist before and that it's not coming back now and that we weren't put here. Like, who's to say that, you know, right now we're reawakening, we're remembering a lot of some of I've heard this, like elders saying that, you know, the ceremonies and the songs are just remembering. That we're remembering. It's not that we're learning, that we're remembering. And so even the ceremonies are remembering. We probably did have coming in ceremonies, and there was a word for that. And it was the place, the honor, like putting back the honor and the position that, not that we're higher or that we're better than, but that we had a specific role and that we had capabilities and that we did do ceremony and that we did. And it's just like elbowing our way back into that lineup of going, you know what, like this is our abilities, you know, and it's not necessarily, and I find that it's hard to make space for new ceremony because there's such a fear of having lost all those ceremonies that as we're remembering, it's like it's coming in with fear. And we don't want it to ever be lost again. So we have all these rules. And elders who are like,
we need to preserve it.
It's becoming like a museum of ceremonies. It's like, got to put a glass case around it. And that's the protocols and that's the structure. And then all of a sudden somebody over here is like, well, what about this? It's like,
no.
But that doesn't fit within the glass case that we've now placed this ceremony that it will forever exist into time immemorial. Because otherwise,
we need to,
what if we forget?
What if we forget? And what if someone comes in and takes it over? There's such a this is ours.
This is ours, and we don't want to share because we don't want it to be appropriated. We don't want it to be taken again. Because there was major theft, you know, that happened,
and it's still happening.
You know, it hasn't stopped. No. Oh wow!
Oh look, there's a theft happening right now. Somebody just acquired another object for their museum. Look at that. Great.
You know, but I think that's, you know, and it's being able to do it without having to ask permission. I think that's what you were saying about that drum, like that realization of like, there's a woman on that drum, or there's a non-binary person on that drum, and there's, you know, there's somebody who shouldn't be there that is there, according to other people. And it's like, no, and it's like that is an example of existing without asking permission.
And no one burst into flames. Like, you know what I mean? Exactly. Like, I thought for sure that I was going to, like, you know, just, like, combust, you know?
Well, your hair did.
Right? Only my hair, you know? But as a recovering Catholic, you know, I have this weird fear. Nice.
Yeah. So I think, you know, as we're moving, and we're right now, I find that because I grew up in a non-Native home, I see the Native community in a different way that I'm on the outside still sometimes, and so I look at the history. I learned the history differently because I never lived there as life. I never lived the community, but I kind of grew up in the community, so I'm able to have a different perspective. But I find that right now it's like there's so much openness, and you know, like our babies are being found, our women are being found. And through technology, you know, like there's no more moccasin telegram. No. Now it's just Instagram. And then like Facebook. And so there's so much awareness, and there's no more room for shadows. You know, and I think that as artists, we're like, okay, let's go. This is our time. Let's do it. We're not going to ask permission. We're going to create, and we're going to sing, and we're going to dance, and we're just going to do it. You know,
we're going to do it, and through doing it, like also demand that we are met there. And if you do not meet us there, then go home. Well, whatever home is, just leave. You know, like,
just not with us.
I'm finding myself. It's like that energy. Like, you know, I picture like there's like, you know, maybe a couple badass like aunties, kukums, whatever, like standing behind me. And when I'm working in context as an artist with non-Native people who like don't actually get it as much. Maybe can't even pronounce jojage, you know? It's like, okay, come on, like just learn a couple words in the language where you're located. Like, come on, it's not that difficult. It's basic. If you know how to say salut, hi, bonjour, oh, then you can say jojage.
Kwe kwe. Sego, you know? Skangoa, you know?
Dana just starts like riffing
yeah.
off.
Let me just
you
riff
can say
this.
like, kanina skomten, kisagiti, maskasawin, wagutuwin, sagituwin, like whatever, man. Like you can know like the whole Anishinaabemowin vocabulary, like tapwewin.
With respect.
With respect.
But with not appropriation.
Without appropriation.
I think there's a learning.
And it's riding that line. And it's like, it's letting down the fear that you're going to make a mistake and that you're going to mess up. It's better to try and to mess up and to be open to receiving the correction. We all know that's what a good like anti-Bannock slap will do for you. You know,
good old Bannock
than
slap.
to not try at all. You know? It's like, and it goes into like, like the they, them, like opening up to pronouns, getting used to saying they, them, you know, like just practicing it and practicing the kwe, practicing the acknowledgement that isn't just like, I'd like to thank the Ganyangeha people, you know, whatever. It's like, I would like to actually be in relationship with the people, be in relationship with the land.
Yeah.
And
but I think we're awakening. We're awakening, but we're also asking non-Indigenous people to be awakened as well.
Yeah.
And I think,
that's it.
like last night, I got a message on Facebook, and it was from somebody I had gone to school with in 1995. And she apparently had been looking for me for the past, I don't know, months or so, especially during all this awareness and the truth and reconciliation. And she apologized to me. At one point, she told me that we were outside and it was in the middle of winter, and I don't know. I said something about it being windy, or she's like, and then she apologized for saying, "Well, isn't this your weather?" I don't remember this moment. I do not remember this moment. I probably was like, "Yeah, it is," you know, whatever. Right. But because of what's happening now, because of the dialogue and the conversations that we are asking people to have, she messaged me. And she apologized, and there was something else I can't remember at the moment, but that was one of the things, and I just thought, wow, it's happening.
Yeah.
Non-Indigenous people are really questioning their behavior. The ones who are able to, the ones who are open to it. And I think this like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was growing up, this never happened. Like it just, you know, like I'm close to like 50 years old, and it's back when I was a child. There was, you know, so I think we're, as much as we are making our space, we're also asking non-Indigenous or I don't like allies. I like
accomplices, because it makes it accomplices, because allies is like, you know, is like a little badge, where accomplice is somebody that's gonna like take the lead from us and listen. We want you to like
and do the dirty work.
And do the dirty work.
It's not about
when
politeness. It's about doing the dirty work. And it's also about like doing their own level of like, you know, subversion of like, okay, how am I subverting the system that I'm benefiting from as an accomplice? And how can I use that power in order to shift and make change? Not just like stand around at the sidelines and watch us do all the work.
And doing hashtags. Hashtags. And it's like, don't just show up when it's fun.
When it's convenient for you, and take photos. Like at the march and vigil for the kids on Cancel Canada Day, there was some people like getting to the front of the line where we were all walking and like posing in front of the line of us. Like, you know, I'm like, no, that is not how this works.
This isn't way too performative.
This isn't just a photo op.
Exactly. And then that kind of like feeds into it again, is like you're a part of something, but what do you actually have at stake? Like, what do you have at stake? You don't. You get to, after the march, you can go back to your home, close the door, and never have to think about it again.
And then like post your beautiful photos on Instagram, hashtag Cancel Canada Day, look at me, I'm such an ally.
215, hashtag, you know, I've taught at McGill with the future lawyers. And there was one moment where I entered the classroom, and all of them had their laptops up, and it was in a stadium, like forum. And all I saw were laptops and the top of their head, like top of their noses. And they were ready. Their fingers poised for the wisdom that was apparently going to spew from my mouth. And I was just like, okay, before we do anything, we're going to close our laptops.
Yes.
The panic, that I felt that rippled throughout the room.
Yeah.
Because there was there was nothing to
What
type.
are they going to do? How are they going to remember it and notate? What are they going to notate with?
But then I reminded them, and I started with the song, and I said, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And this is how we learn. And this is who we are.
Well, I remember talking to my one friend, Shane. Shane was sharing about Giksan culture of like how there is no like words or understanding of that because they were just so much in community that they didn't need to be defined like that, you know, because when we think, oh, there's no words or things to find, like, why don't, you know, even these words like justice or things like that, we don't have those words because we never needed that. We never needed, like, you were always grateful anyway, so you never needed to say thank you because you were grateful. And I think that really opened my eyes also to like this kind of Indigenous sort of queer thing that can happen when we're just trying, you know, we're just trying to grasp at stuff. But once we finally start to like look back into our own stuff, we can actually see is different because of the environments we're in and the weather and the land and the animals and all that really influenced us, you know? So, you know, I always think about that in those ways. Yeah, it's all relational. It's how we related to the land, to each other, you know?
Closing time.
5 minutes. Look at that. I appreciate that you both just sang that. Thank you. Let yourself into the world. So usually, I mean, it's cool to be with a rattle. I feel like we're mixing it up today too. But you know, usually we'd be singing these with drums. And that has a different energy and a different power. But maybe you want to share a little bit like the Dene healing song from your words as the Dene rep.
In the house.
Dene in the house.
Dene in the house.
Well, you know, one of the things is that for me, learning how to drum, learning to feel comfortable with the drum, learning to feel that I had the right to drum is still a journey for me. The same thing, I've been throat singing for about 25 years, and that took a while too to feel like I had the right to, because Inuvialuit don't throat sing, and we have our own songs, but it was a way for me to connect. And so the Dene healing song is one of the songs that, you know, that you taught me, and you can maybe talk about where it came from. But for me, because we're not in my father's territory, I don't have access to that, right? I don't have access to songs, medicine, teachings, elders. And so it was incredible to learn a song from my territory and to carry that and to use that for my own healing. But also a lot of the work that I do is bridging. I was gifted this drum and that I don't have today. But it was asked of me that when I do sing, that it's for healing. And so when I do the Dene healing song, it's mostly when I do hard work or when I'm working with non-Indigenous people, because that's, for me, I realize that's my path. That being able to be comfortable in non-Indigenous and my community is being able to bridge that and to have that dialogue and not necessarily always agree, but just to be able to experience each other and find commonalities, because that's where those walls come down. That's where the hatred comes down and all that, and judgment. And so when I do the healing song, that's one of the things that I've been using it for, is just to help people open their hearts and to see us as contemporary people and see me as that we're fluid, that we are changing, that we're contemporary, but that we're also linked with our past, and we're bringing that with us. Yeah. And that we want them to walk with us, not for us. Yeah. Not on top of us, not lifting it, but just beside us. Yeah, beside. And to bring their knowledge and wisdom, and that, so that's, for me, that's the song. Hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey.
Yeah, so the song was taught to me at the Banff Center, and it was actually one of the first times that I'd ever lifted a drum as well, and learned the Strong Woman song with Kim Gucci from Okanagan, and with Leela Gilday, and just so many incredible, Veronica Johnny, just some really powerful Indigenous singers. And Kira Dawn Colson, who's a really beautiful young person from Northwest Territories, Dene, she'd received this song in a dream. so she sang the song to her auntie over the phone the next day, and her auntie said, "Oh, my girl, you know, that's an old song. Like, that song has come back." And I think that that's the power of being a singer and of carrying a drum and carrying those medicines, is like that's an act of remembering, and that remembering is for community, it's for healing, it's for the land, and it's for those who have come before and those who are yet to be. And so we sang it in the Banff Center, like, and on the edge of mountaintops, and you know, like, for me, I'm like, that's where so many of our songs come from too, right? Like, the tracing of the lines of the land as the song lines of how we also remembered our relationships with how we are on and of the land. So this is the Dene Helen song.
Way